Looks like the first order of business is calling to order the Board of Public Works public hearing on the schedule of rate and fees. And do you do a presentation, or you don't really need to for our sake, I don't think, unless there are any highlights or changes?
Yeah, go ahead and run through it real quick, do it official like, and if anybody from the audience wants to make a comment, they can.
All right, yep, just like we talked about last month, the changes that we're proposing on here would be increasing water rates approximately 7.4%. That would coincide with the recommendations that UFS put together for us, both in their rate study from 2018 and then also confirmed again earlier this year. The main drivers behind the increase would be the loss of Rawls County Public Water Supply as a significant customer, as well as the addition of new debt that we took on with the GAC filtration process. We are becoming more and more aware of what that process is costing us as far as materials and things like that go, and so it's helping as far as budgeting and everything. A reminder with that the new debt that we did take on does require a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio, and so we're very conscientious of that and making sure that we meet that ratio for that debt covenant. The increase that the average customer could see or expect for an average user of about 3,300 gallons a month would be $3.10 for this increase. The second item on there would be increasing the fee for an outside water meter. Customers will use those a lot of times for watering their yard in the summertime, sometimes filling up a swimming pool, things like that. That cost for that meter has not increased for at least 10 years, if not longer, and so we're proposing to increase that from $60 to $85 just to align with the current market cost of what it cost us to purchase the meter. And then really the last change is just some clarification wording regarding the annual rate class analysis that we do. We do that on an annual basis, like I said, using the most recent 12 months of usage, and then any necessary classification changes will be made as soon as administratively feasible. And so we've still got the red-lined draft on there of all of those changes in our schedule of rates and fees. Does anyone have any comments?
Anybody from the board? Do we have any public comments? All right, thank you very much for your work.
Okay. Thank you.
Having heard no comments, I recommend we adjourn this session.
We need a motion in a second.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn, I guess.
Okay. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving right along. I'd like to call to order the December 19th Board of Public Works board meeting. Starting with the invocation. Lord, thank you for the talent that you've bestowed on us through the Board of Public Works with our current employees. Without their dedication, the services of the people of Hannibal would be in jeopardy. Like to pray for the safety of the innocent civilians in the Russia-Ukraine war. Also beg for mild winter in Europe, which is directly affected by all that. And to pray for the peaceful end to the conflict. While we're at it, we could use some snow and rain in the western United States. Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we hear a motion to accept the consent agenda for 2019?
So moved.
All right, thank you very much for your work. Okay. November.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any comments from the audience? Having heard none, Darren, we can start with your general manager report.
Thank you very much. We'll go through it fairly quickly. First of all, the solar RFP for putting in 7 megawatts of solar out at the airport and a 4 megawatt battery.
Turn your microphone.
Thank you. Let me start again. We've just had the opening for the RFPs for the solar project we're proposing out at the airport. Again, use that word proposing, meaning they still have to vet, and the best project has to meet financial requirements where it's viable for us. So there's no absolute shoe-in yet. However, we do have 13 applicants, and we talked to our consultant, GDS, and they've said several of them already look very, very promising. So we're excited about that, and that's a very positive thing. Please recognize it's still going to take a couple of months to completely vet those RFPs, and then the processes of permitting, all those things are required. You still won't see dirt turning or a kilowatt being generated at least for another year, year and a half. So this is a long process, and so please, we ask for your patience on that. Second item up is the 161 Find Oakwood and Substation Project. We are just to the end of it. We're coming very, very, very close. But with that, there's a couple shout outs. The project has gone very well, and that's because of the oversight, especially of the BPW staff. And I would point out that Matt Munslinger and Paul Trentell have done just great jobs of doing their responsibilities, but going above and beyond. But if you'll also see, there's one paragraph in here that I say, Jared Stewart, our electric department supervisor, he needs to receive a special shout out for the extra blood, sweat, and tears that he has put into this project. From day one, he was the one that went and got the easements that were required. That was no small feat, and he definitely put a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears into that. He's done the project direction and oversight to 100% completion, and Jared has gone head and shoulders above and beyond what we could have asked him to do, and I just thank him very much.
Speech.
So-
Speech.
No, let's not.
I would include my foreman, Kenny Garcia, who he's helped a lot as well, out in the field and speaking with our contractor, IPC, and helping run down parts and pieces and making sure everything's going smoothly as well.
And because of supply chain issues, because of it's been a different world we're living in since COVID, and he managed that very well. And so there were some screwballs thrown out there, and he was able to pick that up and run with it, and he did just great on the project. So thank you very much, and I apologize to Kenny for not having mentioned him. Thank you, though. Thank you for mentioning him. And then finally, the 5-year capital improvement planning. Paul's going to talk about that today, introduce it to you. It has also been a very collaborative effort. I'm thankful to Paul and again, Matt. These guys are they're 100%ers. They're going to give you everything they've got. All of the departments have been represented. Everybody is putting that input into it. Our vision is lengthening. Planning is essential. And with that, we're getting things to where we're becoming more and more proactive versus reactive. We've got positive things happening. So are we perfect? Heavens, no. There will still have issues. We're still going to have emergencies we will respond to, and we'll be prepared for that. But this planning is essential for us being on top of that. Final thing is in our public relations, I would say that we're going to be ramping up. We've got I would invite you to take a look at the board packet and read what's there. But also Matthew Jones has done a great job of stepping in and taking care of that empty spot. He has been doing he's gone to the wastewater treatment plant and done a quick video vignette of what that treatment plant does, the water plant. He's doing it for the others. He's got some items to help out with customer service. People don't like to read anymore, but if you can give them a 30-second blurb on how to go do something, we can do that. And Matthew has taken some of his training that he's received recently, putting that through to the test and to actual exercise. And again, kudos to him. He's done, he does nothing but Class A work, and we appreciate all that he's done. That's the end of my report unless you have questions for me.
Any questions? Nope. Thank you very much, Darren. And moving on to Matt Munsklinger for the operations report.
First thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the outage minutes we had for the month of November. It was relatively small. We had 424 minutes that were out. That's a decrease from 610 in October. But on the flip side of that, you'll see that our overall reliability went down a little bit. That's just due to it being a 12-month rolling average. And so we had a good month that just rolled off the books, replaced by, and so this month wasn't as good as that. So you'll see that change there. One thing we're doing at the water plant is we're installing a new generator. That is something I believe we ordered last December, or maybe even before that.
It was supposed to be delivered last December.
And so we finally got notification that all the parts and pieces are in. And so we're working with the contractor to do some concrete work and necessary conduit work to get that installed. That was needed because when we sold one of the 2 megawatt generators, we replaced it with one that was appropriately sized. Water treatment plant, continue on that. We're still above the last 2 years in what we're producing. We're continuing with our GAC exchanges. We're in the last month of our 3-year contract for GAC material, and Alex Dunker is working on securing a GAC contract for the next couple of years. One thing we're exploring is a possible extension with Calgon, who is our current supplier. We also had an issue with some of the wind in our roof up there on the main building, and so we're working with MECO to come up with a set of bid documents so that we can go ahead and get that roof redone. We're looking at a metal roof on it so that long-term maintenance free. Big items in the stormwater system is Bear Creek Dam. We had one inspection in November. That was the Corps of Engineers, because they originally constructed the improvement. They come down about every November and do an inspection. They're looking for settling, tree or vegetation growth along the dam itself or along the spillway. We had done a lot of work up there in early November or late October, early November on clearing. And so they were impressed with that. We were also able to, it was dry enough that we were able to get behind the dam and clean out the debris that floats in during heavy rain events. And so they were impressed with the debris removal and the cleanup on the spillway out off HH. The only thing we got to do is we got to clean up some brush piles that were generated as part of that cleanup effort, and we'll burn them sometime this winter. We had a DNR inspection. DNR actually permits dams in Missouri. So we don't know if it's a dam, it's a levee, whatever, depends which organization you speak with. So DNR also permits that. They've been doing that since early 2000s that they've been permitting this one. And so they came up December 8th and had a inspection of it. Everything went well with it. Because the spillway wasn't constructed to original plans and doesn't meet the hydraulic constraints of today. We get a conditional permit. We were able to secure $500,000 in ARPA funding to help remove any sediment from the spillway floor and also widen that discharge back to widen that discharge to the original plans. And so we'll be working through that as more details come available on how we have to spend that ARPA money.
Does the Corps charge us a fee? Do we get a fee for any of that?
We do not pay any fees for Bear Creek Dam.
It's a good thing that
It was the way that property or that project was done. That was the city of Hannibal purchased the properties that it affected, and then the Corps constructed it and then turned it back over to us for maintenance. So there's nothing. I mean, the city of Hannibal actually had that original expenditure, with the exception of the construction of the dam itself.
the municipality that I was in before, they were spending $12,000 a year in consulting rates to have it inspected every year. So it's nice to have it done, of course, without a fee.
The only thing that we really expend anything on for inspections of permits is every 5 years we got to inspect the conduit through the dam, and so it requires us to spend time up there building the coffer dam downstream and pumping it low enough that we can get in from the downstream side and do it
Concrete?
as concrete. Yep. And then we've got one more inspection on the stormwater side. We've got DNR coming in the 19th of January for a MS4 permit inspection. They're looking at the two MCMs, 4 and 6. But the outcome of them won't be as favorable as the previous two, just because we don't have funding in place, and so we don't have some of the other inspections in place that they would like us to see. So I'll keep you up to date on that. We're continuing to do our meter change out as we can. We're running into supply chain issues with finishing out that project, but hopefully they'll be here in March, and so we'll continue then. But overall, we've got a majority of the meters changed out. And then on mapping, we've got Joe that continues to update our maps and get the points in there when we're doing these meter change outs. So over the last few months, that's been a big workload. So I'd just like to commend him and his work there. And that's all I've got for the operations report, unless you all have any questions.
Just a quick one. You mentioned back at the water treatment contract extension with Calgon. Have you looked at maybe a brand new contract as opposed to extending the one?
That's something we're working.
Toss up?
Yeah, that's something we're working with our consultant Black and Beach on as well. Part of it is they've already got the material. We know how they work. Some of the other previous bidders have had some issues with supply this past couple of years, which we're aware of, and so that's not something we want to get involved with. We want to be able to get that media changed out on the basis that we need to, so that we continue to have good operation of it.
Right.
But it's something that they are looking at.
And if we go with a brand new contract, that means we can't just automatically renew it. It has to go out for bid.
That's probably correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions about the operations report? All right, and Matt, if you could move along to projects.
Okay. On a projects report, 2 projects that we will have coming on the water side of things are the roof project for the water treatment plant, and then also we're going to start doing the filter replacement, the gravity filter replacement. That is roughly $1 million project that's in this year's budget. We had kind of delayed it as we sought some of this ARPA money. We were not selected for it, and so now we're able to get back in and begin that process and move forward with it. Speaking of ARPA money, North Street was funded for $5 million through the city on replacement of that storm sewer. So we're working with them and Pevingstone and Bach to continue that project. Right now, we're just in a holding pattern as we get more direction come from MDNR on that. We don't know what standards we have to meet or how the process works. Talking with some individuals, it'd probably be mid to late January before that information's passed out to those who received funding. And so we've got till the end of, or probably the middle of 2026 to get that money spent. That gives DNR time to close out their project and get the information that needs to be sent to the federal government done. So we do have time, but again, we'd like to get moving as there may be some scarcity of materials and contractors as more people are able to go out and spend their ARPA money. As Darren alluded to, we're about to wrap up the Finn connection with Ameren. 100% of the wires pulled in. We've got our fiber optic connector, or fiber optic done, tested, and it's working. They're working on removal of access matting and gravel roads and such. They're also we'll be starting remediation as they can. Jared's actually got a meeting tomorrow where they're going to go out and do the final inspection of all the line construction and deconstruction. We do have one small portion of deconstruction work to do down around Marion Substation.
They finished at the end of the week last week.
Okay, so we're done with the deconstruction work of the old 74 line. And so that contractor IPC will be done, again, with the exception of the remediation work. We did do our testing for Rawls County commissioners. We did that, I believe it was on the 8th as well, and everything was worked out there. Substation, we ran into supply chain issues, but they're still hopefully get it energized by the end of January, first part of February right now is what it's looking like. We'll know more if those parts that were supposed to show up in, I think, June show up in February. So only outstanding issue we have out on that project is the AC mitigation. That is because we're paralleling the natural gas pipeline that goes through part of this easement. And as part of that, we got to go out and put cathodic or protection out there so that we don't corrode their pipeline. That contractor's got all the materials, and due to availability of workforce, it's looking like January before they'll be able to get out there. Just a couple updates on a couple stormwater projects you may be interested that the city's doing. Union Street, that was a CDBG funded project. Contractor's completed his portion of the work. The only thing yet to be completed is the curb and gutters, sidewalks, and the street restoration, which the city is going to complete once the weather breaks this spring. So the street is open, but it's gravel at this time. The other project is the Lakeside Drive extension. That's the extension of the road between Mimi's and Sleep Inn, further to the south by our west substation. That was a governor's cost share project where the state of Missouri paid roughly 80% of it. I drove by today, and Bly's out there doing final dirt work around the sidewalks and such, and then they'll have to do the remediation work this spring when the weather breaks and they get grass seed sown. So that's all I've got, unless you all have any questions.
On the stormwater project on North Street, do you have any idea whether there's going to be any effort to fill in the abandoned sewer line that runs under some of the houses?
I think right now the plan is not to. It's just to leave it intact. I mean, because you'll never be able to fill it totally without some type of pressure injection of grout or flowable fill. And so the plan right now is just leave that void, but leave access to it.
Okay, cool. Any questions about the project report? Nope. Haven't heard none. We could, if we could move on to Paul's report for financial.
Alrighty, financial report for November 2022. Compared to last month, we did have about $1 million decrease in our unrestricted cash. A couple things there. Purchase power cost did hit us pretty hard in November, kind of like we talked about last month with Prairie State being down. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then with the 161 project kind of starting to wrap up, we're paying off a lot of those significant invoices related to construction. So a little bit of a timing thing there between when we pay off the invoice and then we request reimbursement from our bond proceeds. Also had a significant increase in current assets. That's due to the audit entry that we do every year to adjust our Prairie State receivable. And then we also had a significant decrease in other assets, which would be due to the adjustment to record our loggers activity. This reduced our net pension asset, which ballooned quite a bit last year with how good investment return was, and that came tumbling down to normal with the lower investment return this year. And so the offset to that would have been a decrease in what's known as deferred inflows, which is a liability on the compared to the asset. Lastly, on the balance sheet, we did have a significant increase to equity. As you likely saw in our audit, the final entries to record our net profit were pretty high. We had the significant gain on the generators as well as lower purchase power costs in the electric fund. And so we got that all recorded and wrapped up. So utility-wide, total assets were down about 1.4% from a month ago, and were about 10.9% more than a year ago. So moving on to the income statements in our P&L. Utility-wide for the month of November, net income was about $302,000 less than what we had budgeted. Definitely primarily due to the electric fund. Purchase power costs reflected quite a bit higher than normal. A couple things there. We had 5 MISO bills in November as opposed to the normal 4. Just completely a timing thing there. We always have a couple months that have 5 as opposed to 4. And then those Prairie State MISO credits that we continue talking about every month, obviously were much, much smaller in November, with Prairie State having 1 unit down for all of October and part of November. And so we were paying pretty much full purchase power without getting those credits back from Prairie State. The water fund for November was only slightly behind budget, and the sewer fund actually had another positive month, which was a good sign. Compared to a year ago, utility-wide net income was about $1.2 million less this year. Again, that would be due to the purchase power cost. As far as kilowatt hour sales in the electric fund, those were down about 1.8% from the same month a year ago. So now looking at year to date, we had the poor month in the electric fund, and so we're now about $53,000 less than budgeted utility-wide. Our net purchase power costs are now about $350,000 over budget, and revenues are about $106,000 more than budget, which is an encouraging sign for that fund. Both the water and sewer funds are seeing revenues more than budgeted, but also operating expenses a little bit over budget. And so right now, year to date, the sewer fund is the only fund that's outperforming its budget so far this year. We've got the numbers on there for the year-to-date actual compared to last year. Revenues overall are up about 3%. Purchase power costs are up about 27%, though, which is offsetting those higher revenues. So clearly, we keep talking about how Prairie State has carried us over the last few months. And with it being down in October, we did see a hit there. But obviously, now that it's back up and running, those credits have came right back and returned. So that's been a good sign. We were obviously anticipating the loss for the month with Prairie State being down, and so we did have a hedge in place against any significant swings in market costs. And so now we're looking forward to having it all back up and fully running and giving us that benefit again. Got our normal items on there, but if you want to flip down to page 21, we'll look at the debt service coverage ratios and all of the funds. Obviously, with the electric fund taking a hit, it's now down quite a bit to a 1.75, and the water fund dipped down a little bit as well to a 1.48. The sewer fund is still pretty healthy. So we're keeping an eye on both the electric and water funds and making sure that they meet those 1.25 debt coverage ratio requirements. And I don't believe I had anything else to point out as far as the financial report goes. Does anybody have any questions for November?
So, Paul, does it appear that the Prairie State shutdown ended up netting us about $500,000 more in expenses minus revenues?
In expense, yes, yeah. So it was. We would have budgeted already a slight loss, anyways, for November, just with it being a shoulder month. But yeah, with it being closer to 500,000, that would have been, because we probably would have budgeted right about even, or maybe a slight loss. And so that, yeah, that's probably accurate to say about 500,000 or so.
All right. Any other questions of Paul on the financial report?
No.
All right. I guess you can just stay up there and get into the annual audit report.
Yes, sir. So you've got that hard copy now in front of you. That is the final copy. Between what Amanda and Kristen presented to you last month and that copy there were no changes. And so everything that was presented would be the same. And so unless there's any questions on the audit, it obviously was presented to the council as well, and so they got to see it. as well. Obviously, that's just the BPW report. And then, just so you know, Bob, our BPW financials roll up into the city's overall financial audit report.
Okay.
So they presented that to the council a couple weeks ago. So that's all final and done and out of the way for fiscal year 2022. So if you're looking through there and you have any questions, please just let me know.
So one of the things that I always look for in an audit report is there's an unqualified opinion, correct? And from that unqualified opinion, they say whether it's good or bad. And I believe we received an unqualified opinion that we are all sound. We're using the qualified GASB requirements. We're following everything we should do. The second thing I always look for is the management report where it says, almost at the end of that, it says, here's the things you need to do differently. Did we have any?
We did not have any this year.
That's a solid audit. So please look at it and, dive into it, but that's those two things that I look at. Of course, you can look at the numbers, see where we're at. We're healthy financially, we're in good shape, we're going the right direction. We've got reserves, which are essential to keep us to manage the ups and downs of the market, especially what's going on right now. But it's an unqualified opinion, which means they didn't have to do any kind of, there's nothing wrong with what we provided them. Paul gave him and his team gave all the information they needed in a timely manner. They were able to do their job professionally and correctly, and there was nothing that they saw that we need to do differently. Those are the things that I would simply tell you we're in good financial shape. And again, I thank Paul for doing a great job.
That's wonderful. Right. So on to the schedule of rate and fees.
Okay, so before we have you approve what we have presented here, that'll be effective next month, there is one item that we're going to add here in the near future. We've developed what we're calling an advanced metering infrastructure opt-out program. And so essentially for any customer that potentially wouldn't want an AMI meter installed, we have this program in place to give them that option. And that is required by Missouri state law to give them that option. So we've got some terms and conditions that we've come up with here. And once we've gotten this all approved and through the rate hearing and everything like that, this will be posted on our website with some additional information for any customer to be able to go see. And so basically what those charges will lay out will be what we call a non-standard meter reading fee. And so the premise here is that instead of a customer having an AMI meter, they would just have a basic meter that has a physical digital reading that would need to be read every month. And so we would have to send somebody in a truck to read that, kind of like the old days of how they used to do it. And so that charge would be just our normal $50 charge for that. And then we also have an initial meter removal charge, which would be the actual basic meter itself. And so for an electric meter, that cost would be $105 to remove the old meter and replace it with a basic meter. And then the fee for a water meter would be $50. And those are based on market costs and sending someone out there to do that. And then obviously the reading fee would be $50 every month to send someone out there to actually read that meter, excuse me. And so Matthew and Emily worked hard to work together to put that all together. And so we'll likely get that on next month's agenda as far as a red line document to add it to our schedule of rates and fees. And then we'll set a rate hearing probably for February to go ahead and get that scheduled. And then once we get it passed, like I said, we would post it to our website and it'd be available for anybody to see.
Paul, what happens in a case where someone elects to go with a basic and they get that basic meter installed and they leave those premises? Do we automatically go out and put the automatic reader back on? And
Right.
who pays for that? Or do we leave the basic on and wait till the next tenant comes in that place and
imagine that we would, what's that?
When the new person would come to sign for service, like a new owner, a new tenant, whatever the case may be, then we would put in that AMI meter. Just so we had that communication, and so that that customer had everything to offer that an AMI meter can offer them.
And it costs a truck roll anyways, to be able to shut off a new meter, I guess you would say a basic meter.
Right.
So it costs a truck roll anyway.
So we'd wait till the new tenant came in and they give them the election. If they went to AMI, we would just swap it out. If they elected with basic, then they would not have a connect charge or whatever, a swap out charge. Okay. But if they went with the AMI, we would do it at no charge to them because that's the standard anymore, yes. Okay.
Good question.
So the public hearing on the rates and fees for February you're talking about will be simply the addition of the manual reading?
Correct. Yep, it would just be to add these fees and charges here for the AMI opt-out program.
Right.
As of right now, there wouldn't be anything else that we'd be asking for at that time.
Right.
So as far as today's schedule of rates and fees that'll go into effect here in January, we would just need a motion to approve the schedule of rates and fees as presented.
Do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
And a second?
Second?
And a vote.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks like that carried. All right. Thank you very much, Paul.
All righty, thank you.
And Darren, don't get up, but it looks like you're on schedule for the stormwater rate proposal.
All right.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation we're going to kind of go through very, very, very quickly. I'm going to also ask Matt if he's prepared to stand up and kind of be a co-presenter, and he can help keep me online as we go through this. This is the culmination of the efforts that we have gone with Black and Beach. We have looked at what we need to provide and present to our customers so that we can begin running our stormwater utility. Now, some of this you're going to have as a perhaps a little bit of eye pressure on being able to see all of it. Here we go. Here's our stormwater utility analysis. Do I just go beep? You got it? All right. Go ahead and go. Let's go to the next. On number 3, here's where we stand today. We have a failing drainage infrastructure. Those pictures you see on the left are pretty consistent of the things we've already seen. We have not spent a lot of money going in and doing that. These are things that when we've had problems, road failures, etc., we get to see those things. We get to see the worst of the worst, but we're seeing more and more of it. We've had, at one point in time, I think there was a dozen plates that were on roadways that were collapsing, having problems, and that's all we can do. Because of the Hancock Amendment in the state of Missouri, we cannot use other dollars collected for electric, water, or sewer to fix stormwater. It is its own utility. We are completely held up by that state law from us putting other dollars into it. Chronic flooding and public safety risks. I will tell you that we need to make sure that if there's been pictures of one failure, I guess it was on Union, where it was the shoe of a young girl that had fallen through that was pretty remarkable. It can get people pretty heated. I wouldn't want my children walking in some of those areas myself. So we've got some issues. Deferred O&M. It has been decades since there has been any dollars put into our stormwater systems. And to put on top of that, Matt talked earlier about MS4. Those are state and federal regulations which are requiring us to do certain things for stormwater. It is not just going from quantity, meaning we have a big rain and we want to keep our streets safe and not flooded. If we have an adequate and working stormwater system, it mitigates, it reduces that flooding. We'll never get rid of all of it, but it reduces it, makes it safer But they're now going to be taking the next step and going from that quantity of water to the actual quality of water, where now we have to make sure that we don't have oils and greases and we have other contaminants going through our stormwater system into ultimately the Mississippi, ultimately into the ocean, into the Gulf Coast. So to address our new reality, we have to look at our system integrity. We're going to have to put money into the capital improvements. Those pipes you saw earlier that were collapsing, roadways that are falling apart. North Street is the perfect example. We're kind of lucky that the Army Corps came in and took care of that funding and have done those things. Who was it that really funded it? Is that right? Army Corps?
Army Corps did up to
The first bit. And the level of service. What are we going to do? We have compliance requirements. The community also has needs. How are we going to do that? It's going to take money. So that funding is the question. And then finally, the customer experience. The bottom line also, which makes this doubly tough, is how do we collect it fairly? And I'll use the word fairly many times here because you may not like it. I guarantee you there's nobody going to like it. I don't like paying another 10 cents for a gallon of milk, especially if you don't want a new tax or fee on anybody's home or property, but it's got to be fair. And that's what we've shot for, to do our best. So here's our new reality. We started by determining our costs. The second step is, what's the plan? We can't just throw darts at it. We got to have a plan. And then finally, how do we make it equitable? And what is the mechanism to be as equitable? And we can't really do the same thing we did last time. That failed in that election. So we've got to do something a little bit different. Matt? Here's a little bit of his history. In 2017, the BPW was given the responsibility by the city council to create a stormwater utility. The electric utility we have actually loaned, I believe, was about $1.7 million. We have taken and loaned from the electric to the stormwater. Please note that electric utility, we cannot do that again. We cannot do it from the water, we cannot do it from the electric, and we don't have enough to do it from the sewer, because we have covenants that we have taken with our financing through the electric, our financing for the GAC and the water. They prohibit us from doing any of those transfers. So while we did it in the past, we cannot, absolutely cannot do it in the future, or those other loans, those other funding mechanisms we have for our other utilities become a detriment. We have to pay those off and we could be crushed by that. So the idea of doing that again is absolutely off the table. The BPW completed a stormwater utility feasibility study a couple of years ago. We took that ballot measure forward. Was it August of 21 or was it 20?
It was April of 19.
April of 19 is when we actually went to ballot. It failed by 12 votes. In that ballot, we talked about comparing each property and considering the amount of pervious and impervious surface. There's complexity to that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the BPW currently recommending a gross area-based tax. It's simple, it's very measurable, and we'll talk about it. So the stormwater program definition. Management cost center defines 6 cost centers to establish the program structure. Preliminary program assessment. We evaluated levels of service and performance and what was missing, what we didn't, what was the gap in between. Stormwater, the program matrix defined activities, current status. The program O&M and capital cost estimates developed a 5-year O&M, and we also have a 10-year that we looked at and have been considered. Also, future assessment framework defined based on international infrastructure management manual guidelines. Now, this was done we paid for Black and Beach to do this. I will tell you the team that we had involved with, they were absolutely the best in the business. These are the guys, if we go to do training, if you go to learn anything about stormwater, We have the folks that we dealt with, that Matt worked with, they're the best. Matt, anything else you want to add there?
Just a lot of time and effort went into the background so that we could develop this cost model and move forward.
So I'm going to go very quick through the next few slides, and that really is to just show you and the public what Matt just said. This was not a simple dart thrown at the board. They looked at system operations. We looked at all of the costs. We were as consistent and complete as we could be. We have multiple Excel spreadsheets that are covering dates and costs and areas and problems, and it was measured, it's been weighed. And so we have these 6 items. We do know what the system operations costs are, system management and engineering costs. We're looking at the first thing to do, an assessment of the system, a modeling of the system, GIS applications. We have the MS4 regulatory compliance requirements that have been looked at and measured. Our utility implementation, what's it going to take? How many people? What kind of trucks? What kind of equipment do we need to have? What's it going to do to our customer service when we implement this new utility? You go down to program administration, we've got the management, the IT involved in it. We then look at the capital programs. What is really, we know that we have some things that we're going to be doing that are going to require that capital plan. Where does that all start? So this, again, it took a lot of thought and a lot of effort, and it has been measured correctly, as accurately as we can. Multi-year financial plan, this is for 5 years. We recognize also that the money that are going to be coming in, if we get the ballot to pass in April of 2023, we're not going to see $1 until January of 2024, and we've got that budgeted, and we're looking at those things as we go forward. So here is an O&M expense plan for 5 years. Starts in 23, but we're still looking at those costs that would be deferred. It's so long as it begins in April, we could actually defer some of that and be able to move forward, recognizing that we actually have a solid funding source coming forward. Next one. Matt, again, if you want to jump in on anything, please do. Here's an O&M that we pushed out for 10 years. Go to the next. Again, it's too small for me to read. Go ahead.
Just for the 10-year O&M plan, the reason we're looking at long-term financials is because this is a tax, we can't just adjust the rates like we did based upon our input cost or our labor cost, like with what we just did with the water. And so in order to increase the stormwater tax, we'd have to go back out to a vote of the people. It may or may not pass, depends on what the mood is at the time. So this is why we're doing these long-term projections, so that we make sure that we capture the monies needed in order to do it at least out to 10 years. That would also allow us to do bonding for some of the larger projects and show that whomever we sold the bonds to, that we were able to pay that back at least for 10 years.
Does it also include the fund-to-fund transfer of?
It does, repayment of that.
Okay.
Yep, that is included.
Go ahead.
We did the same with the capital plan that we did with the O&M cost. That way that we could have our 5-year cost and also our 10-year cost. And here's financing. You know, again, the 5-year cost and the 10-year cost.
Now, we looked at 2 different types. You'll see that big width right there in the blue. The financial plan with exempt property charges. Now, we've got Ethan here, so he's going to be able to speak up to this. We were informed that we have the ability, if you have an election, that you can either put into that ballot language that you could have exempt properties still charged. Ethan, you came back into us and have said what?
So
Microphone.
there's a certain statute that there is some language in some statutes that basically says that certain properties are completely exempt from it and that there are no exceptions. So we're still looking into it a little bit. But at this time, we don't believe that those properties can be charged since it is property tax and they're exempt by state statute.
What types of property are we talking about? churches, school, nonprofits, colleges, veteran organizations, all those.
So we're going to go real quick through the next 3 or 4 slides here because we felt we had that option. And that was a discussion I wanted to have with you as the board. Should we put those exempt properties into this ballot language so that they paid their share of their impact? What we found is that approximately 19.5% of our property inside of Hannibal is that exempt property. So we've got approximately a 20% bump in what it's going to cost for us to take and put a fee on all of those that are not exempt to take and make up that difference. So that was kind of our hope, is that we could include them, that the voice would carry the day, and that would be a lower individual rate for everybody else. But as per our council, we're not going to be able to do that. So,
And ultimately, what our result was on this was an average residential lot of 0.22 acres. That's based off of what we were able to pull from our GIS data collected from the counties. It would result in an annual charge to the consumer of $104.46 charge. Non-residential properties, the average one was 0.45 of an acre, and that would work out to an annualized charge of $213.66. Again, the plan would be to collect that with the property tax bills that the county already sends out, just for the simple fact that they know the property size. They've got all that data. They've got all the data from who owns the property, and then they have the collection method as well. They presently collect all the taxes for the city as well, and they've indicated in the past that it would just be a simple MOU between us and the 2 different counties. We pay a percentage based upon the amount collected.
And this has to go in as a tax, not a fee.
That is correct.
go ahead and go one more because we may be,
So
okay, so kind of ignore, okay, I'm going to get in trouble here. Forget those 104 because now we have to look at the without exempt properties charged. Go ahead and click through there a couple to get to 5-year, 10-year plan right there. $567.15 per acre. That is what we need to put on our ballot that we're going to be collecting. And there's the dollar amount. It was 104, I believe. That's actually the median for a 2.22 acre is right at $124.77.
Just a note too, both scenarios, the city properties were exempt or pulled out as well, so they weren't included in any of the calculations.
Excellent, correct. And so if you look to the left, there's that 19.5% higher because we have to take out those exempt properties. The others get to carry the weight.
So I think this equates out to about $10.40 a month. I think when we were looking at the impervious fee that with the vote that failed, we were looking about $6 to $7 a month, I think is what we had included then.
So in this calculation, the non-residents would include every factory and every business and every store.
Based,
So kind of the process moving forward would be to gain your approval, hopefully tonight on this process and method. And then we would work with Ethan to develop the language and get that on the council for January 3rd. And then that would be the first reading. Second reading would follow on January 17th, which is before I think it's the 24th. It has to be the county clerks.
So will we get to see, this board, get to see that language, that ballot language before it goes to city council?
no, we would have, Ethan would be writing that up and would be put it into the January 3rd.
It had to be done next week.
So
Yeah,
we're,
next week.
we're short on time, but with your approval, that's what I'm asking you for today, is that we approve the $567.15 per acre gross property assessment for all non-exempt taxpayers.
Can we see his final project distributed via email?
Yes,
So we
absolutely.
can see that language.
Now, if you wanted, we could hold a special meeting to get y'all here to at once, but again, I think we can give you all of the language that's going to be vetted right through legal.
This has nothing to do with the approval of this, but we have to have something on the ballot. Something needs to be done to increase the knowledge of the people in Hannibal. We have to have a public awareness of this, or it'll never pass.
So here's your discussion. I have one bullet point there for you. Education. We cannot, so I as a member and our team as a member of the BPW, we cannot go and invite anybody to vote yes for this.
Right, understood.
All we can do is educate. We can only say, if you vote for it, this is what's going to happen. We're going to create a utility. We're going to hire people. We're going to have assets such as trucks and vac trucks, and we're going to clean that system, and we're going to repair that system so far as our monies will let us go. If you do not, we will not hire anybody. We will not get any trucks. The system will continue to deteriorate. We don't know at what rate. We don't know to what degree. We don't know how safe or unsafe it is actually, but we know it hasn't been touched for over many decades, and it's in a bad way. That's the full extent of our, that's the full extent of our education.
Right.
And there's going to be a ballot in April 2023 in which they can come and vote.
But that's exactly what I was talking about. They have to be educated or it will not pass. All they will see is, oh, my property taxes are increasing $125 a year. I don't want that. No.
Yep. You're absolutely correct. And so that education is absolutely key. We will be hiring a new PR person to help with Matthew Jones and with the entire team. Courtney's a big part of that as well. But we are looking at, she's great at communication. But with that, we're going to have to get it out and get it in front of the people. And we'd love to have citizenry that may be watching that are willing and might be a little bit motivated on this subject to come and help. We need that. And I'd love to have, and Mike knows how to get tough things passed. We could probably use their help in doing those things.
I'm just going to, I guess, question for council. They would be permitted to introduce educational flyers in with their bills, would they not?
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Because
being
I
against it.
think that's how the sales tax passed was because information was out there on everybody's door in my ward.
Okay.
And I really think, the second ward carried that sales tax. I think, information's the key.
And if council will tell me that it's legal for me to do that, we'll do it. You bet. You bet.
Possibly an article in the Hannibal magazine.
I think
Or is that
I think if
stepping-
you're actually, I think as soon as you start paying money for it, that's
Oh,
that's my
I didn't
that's my
realize that cost.
yeah, that's my understanding is that if there's a cost to it,
Okay.
that becomes an offense against the Hancock Amendment. So that's where again I'm going to lean heavily on council to keep me out of jail. That
Yes.
are we going to? We've got to do this the right way. And so there's been some questions about how deep we can do that. So I'm simply going to say I'm checking really carefully with council what we can do, to what level we can go with that education. But we definitely will. We want that. That's our next job, is to get out there in front of people and let them know what we're doing. What's that $120 a month? Well, a year going to do for you?
Even if we put a flyer in with a bill, there's not many people that get that bill in the mail anymore. So
You're right.
Good point.
Or they don't open it.
What's that?
Or the ones that do get it may not open it either.
Right?
The,
So there has to be an alternative method of reaching those people. I don't know what that is.
and how we do that. And again, we're going to have to work very carefully. So how we do it and what's right. The other comment I would make on this whole thing is that this truly is for the greater good of the community. One of the problems that happens is you get the guy on top of the hill and you get the guy at the bottom of the hill. The guy at the top of the hill, I don't have any pipe in front of me. I don't get flooded. I don't care, and I'm not going to pay another nickel. Problem is, he drives down the road and goes to town. He's the one that touches the roads. Those roads are actually a part of our stormwater system. So the city maintains the upper part of the road. What you see, we take care of what's underground. At least that's our responsibility. And so we've got to help people know and understand this truly is a community problem. This fee is for the greater good of everyone. Even though we may be working downtown, everybody benefits from that. It is for the greater good of the community that we're asking for this fee to be passed. Did I say that? I'll
One
let
of
you
the
get
things you may work on too was we had a citizens committee. Mark Ross headed it up, and there were some financial people on it, and some business people. There was half a dozen people on it, and Mark and I donated a little bit of money and had some signs made. Now whether 20 signs around town will make a difference or not, it certainly doesn't hurt to have a citizens committee.
You got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Matt, anything else? So what I would ask for is a motion to approve the language for a stormwater fee of $567.15 per acre. Matt, is there anything else we would add to that? I think that's all we need. If we get that information, will that be adequate for you to be able to draw up the language for that ballot?
Yes, it would.
Was there any consideration to charging only residences and not businesses?
So we could have done that, but again, that starts to drive up that cost again. We felt that we were trying to, we tried hard to move it towards including more exempt properties to take and bring that cost down per residence so that the residents didn't feel like they were carrying all the burden.
Motion to approve the proposal as presented at $567.15 per acre.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Looks like motion carries. Do we need individual names? No. Okay. All right, Darren, that's awesome.
Thank
It's
you
like
very much.
on to new business. 5-year capital improvements. Paul, sir.
Bill, John, you've been through this process before, but Bob, this is kind of the start of our budgeting process for fiscal year 24.
Understand the process.
Awesome. Good. So, kind of the way this specific document here works is we get it in front of the board as soon as possible, and then we'll actually ask you to approve it next month, and then it'll go to the Planning and Zoning Commission with the city, along with all the other city entities, capital projects as well, and we'll look at that kind of all together later this spring. And so we've got a draft of the plan in front of you today. Like Darren mentioned earlier, this was a collective effort between all of the supervisors that are in charge of these different funds and capital projects. And so one thing I did want to point out is that we do have Alex Dunker on board now for over a year, as well as Lance Kendrick in his position now. So we feel like we've really got a good grasp on things and getting some things done from a capital standpoint with having the right bodies in place. And so definitely look this over if you can in the next month or so. and reach out with any questions that you have. Really, the only other thing to explain is that we've got a yellow highlight that denotes when financing is intended. And so if you kind of get down in the electric fund, you obviously see the 161 project is utilizing funding for that, as well as some of the other projects that are a little further out. And then really the water and sewer funds are both already leveraged as far as financing goes. And so most of that would just be what we call equity financing, or paid for out of cash and reserves that are set aside for some of these capital projects. But yeah, definitely take a look at this. Happy to answer any questions that you have right now. If not, we can certainly go through it in more detail if you would like between now and then, and if not, definitely at January's meeting before we actually ask you to approve the plan.
Paul, is there anything in mind for the facilities improvements listed for $300,000 a year?
Yeah, definitely. Always a discussion every year on what should specifically come out of that. The reason that that's highlighted gray, if you recall from last year, is that anything that's highlighted gray has a potential for to be something much, much greater. So obviously with the business park, you're talking about whatever ends up happening out there as far as new businesses. Here with this facility, if a stormwater fee or tax were to pass and we had a greater need for more trucks, more bodies, we're going to need to definitely look at some expansion and things like that. And so specifically for what's on here right now, we're kind of in need of some new carpet out in the front office area. We've got that whole layout that was done kind of with COVID that isn't ideal. And so definitely kind of looking at changing some things up with that and some other things. We did the new sign out here, and some of the yard work that was done along with that would fall into that a little bit. And so that is a discussion we had as an admin department, but really a lot of that depends on our near future here and deciding where we go with that. Yeah.
I noted you had some security upgrades in light of the North Carolina. I was out in North Carolina when somebody decided to shoot up one of their substations, and like 3 counties were out of power for 4 days. Obviously, I'm aware of that kind of stuff, but I thought, oh my gosh. But the camera security and those sorts of things, I see you have some money in there for that. The other item, it's a question about, I think it was on SW2, the levee pumps. Do we have in that plan the maintenance, long-term maintenance coverage for that? We talked about it I did it last month about creating a fee, or not a fee, a line item.
So, I was going to say, anytime you use the word maintenance, it's going to be not a capital item. It would be a repairs and maintenance, which would go in our O&M
Thank you.
expense budget. Yeah.
I don't know if those pumps have to be exercised or how we take care of it.
Can't exercise them because we don't have water. It's a good problem to have, but we do annual testing on them.
Okay.
We do monitor them now as well, if they're on or off.
So is that electronic? In other words,
Or SCADA system.
lets us. Okay, great.
We take the value of those, depreciate them, and collect that in the O&M, but that becomes a different budget than what we see in capital. But I'm sure that you've already done that.
Right. So, yeah,
It's appreciated, we're putting that aside, so if and when they do fail, we'll be able to replace it at that time.
That's the whole idea. Appreciate it.
So Paul, does the ownership structure of the business park have anything any implication or impact on the budget amounts?
that's a really good question. A lot of the work that's kind of listed there, it talks about some of the improvements. It's pretty well already been done in terms of getting it ready for somebody to come in there. Anything else that would need to be done additional would likely be very specific to whatever industry that was. But yes, so to your question on transferring that to the HREDC, that would certainly be a collaborative effort, as we do have obviously an investment in that property. And so with us still needing to recoup that investment, there would be a discussion that would be had in terms of getting it ready for whomever we're going to need it.
Yeah, it sounds safe to have something budgeted for it because something might have to be done and you don't know who needs what right now, so.
No doubt.
As I was going through this list, I was curious whether there was any potential for any grants to cover any of this items.
Yeah, great question. We've got a third-party capital contribution / grant funding. Unfortunately, with just having gone through this whole ARPA process, we had some in there, like Darren mentioned, with that. We haven't really pursued anything in addition to that at this point. Always some potential when you talk about water and sewer, that there could be something out there, but a lot of focus, like I said, went into that ARPA funding, and so with that all kind of being done, and who knows if there'll be, multiple rounds of that or what have you, but
I will tell you, just from my management, from my understanding, my belief as a fiscal conservative, we want to be able to run our own show. We need to have revenues, we need to have reserves so that we can be a solid
Exactly.
business model. When it comes to grants, that's fantastic, but that's icing on the cake.
Exactly.
And we'll continue to go after them. I mean, but recognize they're absolutely competitive models. When Matt went through and we went after a lot of money for the ARPA funding. We only got a very small portion of it. There was $1 billion requested out of $480 million for the state. We're going to do the same, but so stormwater. I believe once we have a revenue source that we can say, all right, we're going to be competitive. We're going to be able to put 50% of this project. We'll pay for a grant perhaps for the other 50. Then it becomes more viable. But until, we've got to live on grants. Absolutely. We're going to continue to go after those monies the very best we can. But we're also going to be in charge of our own destiny by being
Exactly.
able to pay for it ourselves, have the monies that we need to do it ourselves.
But it's nice to get as much icing as we can.
We're going to get as much ice as we can.
I mean,
love
one
ice.
of the things that I noticed right away, in my former life, I worked for the railroad down here at the bridge, and the government provided a grant for security cameras, a whole slew of security cameras down there. And so those were all funded because of the nature of that, because they were concerned about terrorism. Something like that might be, a facility where you're providing public utilities. Now, what could happen to this town if something hit and we were completely out of utilities?
You bet. No,
So-
we try and we've got our ear to the ground. We've got MPUA helps us. They give us a lot of information for water grants, for sewer, for electric. They help us.
That's another bullet point for your stormwater initiative, is that there's money out there for grant funding for some of these infrastructure projects, but it requires match.
That's
And
right.
if you don't have funding, you don't have match.
Yep.
That's great point. So Paul, this stormwater utility, does it have any reserve requirements like the other ones do?
At this time, no. As far as, do we have any reserves set aside? You mean that we're building towards at this point, or?
Well, our requirement of 1.25, 125% of, I can't remember the term. I'm assuming that doesn't just slop over to stormwater.
Correct.
budgets.
Yeah, that's all driven by the debt that's taken out as part of that fund, and so we have debt coverage ratio.
It might if we borrow money though.
Correct.
So if we,
Over
I would
time, that may be
anticipate that.
created, depends on the type of funding we go after.
Oh,
So it depends on the bonding, it depends on what kind of funding you go for, what they require for collateral, what they require for that debt ratio coverage. And so that's a great question. I think in our 10-year plan that Black and Beach brought us with actually has a little bit of it, but we have so much, we're gonna be scrambling to be catching up. I don't see us having a whole lot of reserve in our stormwater funding for many, many, many years.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a motion?
No, we don't need anything at this time.
Just make us aware.
We'll talk about it more next month and then be asking you to approve it then. And like I said, that'll kind of kick off our budget process, and so we'll begin looking at the O&M budget shortly after that.
All right, any other questions about the capital improvement plan? Having heard none, looks like new business. Next item is to set time and date of January and February 23 board meetings.
Both the January and February board meetings are holidays. So if you guys want to come and meet, that'd be great. I'm not planning on being here. But I believe we were to propose to go to the Tuesday, the day after, on both January and February. Courtney, help me out with those dates, if you would.
January 16 is what? Oh, that's MLK?
So we're looking at the 17th.
17th
The 17th and the 21st.
is 20th is President's Day.
Yes, those are both holidays for the BPW. But if we were to hold them on the Tuesdays of that month, that would, I think, we'd work just fine and still get stuff to the city that evening, or to the city meeting if we need. So.
Okay.
Everybody okay with doing it, pushing it one day?
Yes.
Yeah.
January and February? Okay, let's do that.
4 o'clock,
4 o'clock.
same time, day later. And with that, I have nothing else.
All right, and do we have any comments from the city attorney?
I have nothing.
Okay. Any general discussion? All right. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session for whatever those purposes are?
So moved pursuant to section 610.021212 of the Missouri Sunshine Law. The meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss real estate and contracts. To include all board members, Darren Gordon, Matt Mudslinger, Paul Trahell, and Courtney Harris. Do we need Ethan? Or legal?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Turn your microphones off. Hey, Jared.